motion, which I support, that it's time to take a recess, a short recess, Mr. Speaker, for the leaders and the nation to have a deep reflection of the events that took place yesterday. Mr. Speaker, from a personal view, it's a very sad day for the history of Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, the history we wrote yesterday as a nation is not anything we can be very proud of, Mr. Speaker. Why? Because when I recall the sequence of issues that led and events that led to yesterday's experience, Mr. Speaker, it's very, very sad state of affairs. It began very well, Mr. Speaker. There was the Genz who needed a conversation, who needed to be heard, which is correct, and rightfully so, Mr. Speaker, because they are citizens in this republic, Mr. Speaker. And there was a guide that was given by the Minister for Security, Mr. Speaker. I remember he gave an address. He detailed how that right in Article 37, the right to demonstrate and picket, was going to be carried out, Mr. Speaker. And I also saw, Mr. Speaker, from the Law Society of Kenya, giving a sort of a guide on the do's and don'ts in the event of exercising of Article 37 of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. In that guide that was given by LSK, which is supposed to be a neutral body, Mr. Speaker, the Genz was guided very well that they should not go near institutions, Mr. Speaker, which are secured, institutions like Parliament, places like State House. They were guided very, very well not to interfere with the integrity of the institution, Mr. Speaker. So the conversation, the morning section was good, Mr. Speaker. I was in the House and we were conducting business as usual, Mr. Speaker, but we could hear tear gas being thrown in different parts, Mr. Speaker, because of the heavy masses that had gathered. What started well in the morning, Mr. Speaker, as an exercise of that right, was breached somewhere in the middle of the day, Mr. Speaker, when now there were other demonstrators who came in and the intention seemed to have been altered from the initial conversation which was needed by the Genz, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the masses wanted to break down into Parliament and they started banning things, and I could see some people who were even in the dining area, Mr. Speaker, having the lunch that was served there. While having the lunch may not be a big deal because that may be money that is from the taxpayers' coffers, Mr. Speaker, and which the members, by the way, usually pay for when they take a plate of food there, Mr. Speaker. While that may not have been a big issue, and those who have visited Parliament on a normal day know that they are always free to have that lunch anytime they are cleared at the gate to visit. And Parliament has never denied access to any member of public to actually visit the institution once they give the notice, Mr. Speaker. What was very worrying was the criminal intention that rode with the demonstration, Mr. Speaker. So the police were cornered. And it is very sad, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very saddened as a mother and as a leader in this nation to imagine that one teenager or one young person lost their life yesterday, and we deeply condole with those families. That was never the intention and should never have been the intention of that demonstration, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is an apparent conflict right here, Mr. Speaker. And it is normal for a family, for a community, for institutions to even have conflicts, Mr. Speaker. But how do we resolve those conflicts? Any institution, any family that is not able to resolve conflicts in a timely fashion and in a manner where people feel listened to, Mr. Speaker, it ends up very poorly, because if it's a couple, Mr. Speaker, there will be a divorce. If it's a family, there can be a breakup. If it's an institution, people go different ways, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the reason why we need this short break now is because we need to have a serious conversation. And this serious conversation is not about us and them, Mr. Speaker. It should be a Kenyan conversation, Mr. Speaker. We must take time, Mr. Speaker, now to listen to one another and hear what are these grievances, how can they be resolved. Does the Constitution offer a pathway for people to resolve these conflicts? I want to say this to our children, because the Genz are our children. The same Constitution that gave you Article 37 gives ventilation mechanism in the event that you have issues you want to ventilate to Parliament. You can do a petition, present it at the gate. Sensibly, that petition is taken, it's debated, Mr. Speaker, it is sent to a committee, members of public are invited, and they bring their views, Mr. Speaker. And I want to assure the Genz, the leaders who have been voted in this House, on very many occasions, they represent the views and the rights of the Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, so that we do not have integrity of institutions like Parliament, which are constitutional, Mr. Speaker, being denigrated to a point where people feel that they need to walk, maybe ban a few things, and then maybe they will be heard. That is the wrong approach, Mr. Speaker. And I think it is good we be honest with all of ourselves. As leaders, yes, we are willing to listen. Churches, open up your doors, take the views of these people, help them present the petitions, guide them the right way. Because, Mr. Speaker, even if it was in our homes, when our young people, because we live with these young people and sometimes they don't agree with us even as parents, when our young people are not happy with maybe what is being dished out at home, the schools they are being taken to, do we tell them, can you take knives and walk all over, or do things that are so unprecedented or harmful to themselves and harmful to the other members of the society? No. We guide that, Mr. Speaker. As senators, we take this recess, Mr. Speaker. Let all the institutions open doors, present their views, let those views be given to Parliament. Members of Parliament are willing to listen, Mr. Speaker. And if anything has gone wrong, it can always be corrected. There is nothing that has gone wrong that cannot be corrected, Mr. Speaker. This nation has been through a very tough journey, Mr. Speaker. Even the making of Constitution 2010. Let people not forget, Mr. Speaker, that even during the making of Constitution 2010, people did not fully agree on the clauses that were being made. Yet there was a journey and there was a process. And in that journey and in that process, we do not need to have one person lost in the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we say, Mr. Speaker, as we take this recess, let's take a reflection, even as leaders. It is good, Mr. Speaker, for leaders that we are also sensitive, Mr. Speaker, to the plight of the people who are raising issues. So that, Mr. Speaker, when we sit down and discuss and agree on the grievances that people are having, Mr. Speaker, they need to be assured that the institution of Parliament stands to represent the people of Kenya. And that is our calling. It is the integrity of our calling. What we call upon the Genz to do is that as we take this recess, Mr. Speaker, and I believe and pray that the vote will be in favor of a short recess, Mr. Speaker. As we take this short recess, Mr. Speaker, our doors are open. We want to listen to you. We want to talk to the churches. We want to have the petitions that you have that you think they should be presented before Parliament, and we know we can come up with a conclusion. Because even when we later look at the constitutional amendments that we need, Mr. Speaker, even through the NADCO report, that listening has to be done, Mr. Speaker, and we are willing to do it as the institution of Parliament. And for those who planned mayhem, those who attacked institutions or businesses like Quickmart. I saw the Quickmart somewhere downtown was attacked, raided, many places banned. Was that necessary? Was that the exercise of Article 37? Let's answer the hard questions as Kenyans. Do we want to rebuild, or do we want to destroy first and then say we want to rebuild? As young people, as parents, what we want to do for this nation is to rebuild. Mr. Speaker, if we read the book of Nehemiah, Mr. Speaker, Nehemiah was charged with the heavy responsibility of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, Mr. Speaker. I know he had a very tough task because there were those who were saying it cannot be rebuilt. This nation of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, is in the hands of not just the leaders, but the parents. It is in the hands of the youths. It's in the hands of our presidency and our deputy presidents, and we must all accept. We must work together to rebuild the walls of this nation and not to bring shame to our nation. Our nation, Mr. Speaker, is the one that has given birth to so many nations that have been in conflict around us, Mr. Speaker. And in hard times, Mr. Speaker, the true test of the strength of our nation you come when it is the hard time, Mr. Speaker. We should write a blueprint from here, Mr. Speaker, that nations that almost tilt are close to the edge of going down, Mr. Speaker, can regain and bounce back and give confidence to the people, Mr. Speaker. With that, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support the motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Wambua.
Thank you.